My name is Chris Evan, and I'm the CEO of Survival Dispatch. I was a member of our national powerlifting team for many years and won many state, national, and world championships. Even though I'm in great shape for being 55 years old, I am not immune to father time. Most of us feel weaker and make more trips to the bathroom as we get older. U.S. Army research has led to a breakthrough for the #1 water for older Americans. It's not a special sports drink, but a mix with essential nutrients most hydration drinks lack. Keyword, hydration. These nutrients are proven to enhance muscle strength, reduce soreness, and improve bladder health. A Texas doctor leveraged this research and formulated a drink mix to help you stay strong. Click the link below for up to 44% off at nativehydrate.com/dispatch, plus free shipping and a free gift. This is one of the best deals I've seen for high quality BCAA drink mixes. Don't miss this deal. And we're back. And we've got a special guest this evening, Mike Darter, the founder of CCW Safe. Good to see you, Mike.
Thank you. Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
I'm guessing that our audience is probably very thankful to see you, because I've explained many, many times how it's been an 18-month process of us not officially endorsing any self-defense coverage. And we've had some great discussions, people on your team like Gary and Chad and Mackenzie, and really glad that we were able to come to a meeting of the minds, because this is a really important topic. So
yeah,
I'll have you introduce yourself to our audience so I don't do you any injustices, and then we'll kick off the conversation.
All right, sounds good. I'm Mike Darter. I'm the co-founder and CEO of CCW Safe. I spent 20 years in law enforcement. During that time, I was involved in a shooting when I was a police officer at Oklahoma City. Ended up going through a 2-year lawsuit, federal lawsuit, and won that case, but it took, about 2 years to get through it. Luckily, I was a FOP member, so I had the Fraternal Order of Police cover me on all that. And, when I left law enforcement, I realized I didn't have an FOP anymore. So started looking kind of at what was out there, and my stepbrother, Kyle Sweet, who's our general counsel, I called him and we kind of looked what was out there, and there really wasn't anything out there that would have given us the same comfort level that we had as police officers. So, he's like, man, we need to do this. So we did. And 12 years later, here we are. So
now I'm feeling old. I'm thinking to myself that it seems like I just heard of y'all the other day ago, but it's 12 years.
Yeah, 12 years. Well, it took us, we started in 2012. It took us about a year to kind of get the infrastructure down, kind of get, how we were going to cover our members. We knew early on that we weren't going to go the insurance route. We didn't want to be an insurance product. So, it was about probably 2013, 14 when we really started to get a lot of members. And we only wanted Oklahoma and Texas, because I worked 10 years with Oklahoma City Police Department and then 10 years in Dallas. And so with the connections there, that was kind of the thought process. And within 6 months, we had, half the country. And pretty soon after that, we had the whole country. So
yeah, it's fascinating. I've got a couple comments to make on that and questions as well. I just want to explain to our audience that we've changed up the introduction to our videos a little bit, and all the boilerplate stuff has been moved to the end. So there's a number of sponsors for this video, like Sawyer Products, Advantage Gold, and Native Path, but I'll talk about them at the end of the video. And we also offer free memberships on our Patreon, patreon.com/survival dispatch, where you can download the brief for each episode and follow along later on at your own pace, whatever the case may be. So I don't have this in the first part of the brief that I sent you, Mike, but you touched on a really important aspect, that you did not want to be in the insurance industry.
Mm-hmm.
And that has kind of bit some other people in the ass. And I'm not going to name any names. As I mentioned to you, and I've mentioned our audience countless times, we are not in the business of hurting other people's businesses,
Right.
even if they're doing something that we don't agree with. But correct me if I'm wrong. My understanding is that it's illegal. There's a federal law that makes it illegal for an insurance company to pay benefits when somebody has broken the law.
Yeah, and an intentional act. So virtually every state, it's illegal for insurance to cover an intentional act.
So,
So
well, I'll go ahead, Mike. You go first, and then I'll throw
yeah,
it out.
so that's a big reason why we didn't want to. We wanted to go another route because I mean we've all dealt with insurance, and it's not fun dealing with insurance. And early on we realized, and Kyle Sweet, who is our general counsel, he's my stepbrother. He was a police officer for a while before he went to law school, and he was like, man, any he works with insurance companies. He's for 20 years he did catastrophic medical cases, so he's very familiar with insurance companies, how they work. And he was like, any attorney is going to be able to to pretty easily show that pulling a trigger is an intentional act. And
Yes.
we, early on just realized, insurance is not the best route to go. And being that we were in law enforcement and being that I had been involved in a shooting and been sued in federal court, going through that, the system that we had in place through a police union, that's what we wanted to, try to create. And I think we actually did a really good job. And it's, 12 years now, it's going kind of full circle. We a few years back, we actually started working cases. Kyle Sweet and his firm started working cases for officer involved shootings in the state of Oklahoma. So, um, and what we provided, even at the time when we started CCW Safe, it was really better than what most officers were getting through their unions or departments. And so we were able to really build on that and, create something that it's not in the traditional market, it's not in traditional insurance, and we can do a lot more than what a lot of our competitors can do. And you mentioned earlier about competitors. I fully believe that whatever, all of our competitors are going to do exactly what they say they're going to do. It's just we do it a little different. We're not an insurance company or a critical response team. We're really the only uh, one in the industry that has a dedicated critical response team like we have. And that first 48 hours is so important to lock down. So we just do things differently. There's no doubt in my mind that these other companies are going to do what they say they're going to do.
Mhm.
They're going to provide the services that they say they're going to. It's just we do things differently.
Yeah, as you were mentioning that, Mike, I was thinking to myself that necessity truly is the mother of all invention. And there's
Yeah.
so many successes like yours where the product didn't exist, the company didn't exist, and you had to invent it yourself to
Yeah.
fill that void. The other piece to it, of course, is that one of the pillars of being convicted is proving intention.
Mhm.
So if you're convicted, there's your intention piece as far as the insurance is concerned.
Right.
And I guess where that's a bone of contention for me with certain providers out there who shall remain unnamed is that over 95% of the time, as you know, when criminal charges are laid, they're pled out. And
Right.
the DA essentially says, look, take this lesser sentence and we'll settle it right now. And most attorneys will tell their clients, don't roll the dice.
Mhm.
This is an easy way out without risking potentially going to jail for decades. And as soon as that threshold is crossed, well, now you're into the insurance benefits, and yet you've been
Mhm.
convicted of a crime, and the wheels start to come off. So we're not really following the brief, and I'm perfectly okay with that. I love it
Yeah.
when we strike up an organic conversation. We spoke briefly before we went live on how most police unions, like you mentioned, have an SOP where the officer gets whisked away to make sure that they're okay.
Mhm.
Have a doctor look at them, all those things, and that saves them from saying something that could potentially be used against them when they're, a high level of anxiety. And, I mentioned to you, and I've mentioned to our audience before, I swapped my Texas CWP for a Florida one many years ago. And it was a 30-year PD, Port Orange detective. And he said, when you make that call, God forbid you're in a citizen-involved shooting, you don't say that you shot somebody. You say there's been a shooting and that you need 2 ambulances, one for the other person and one for you because you're having chest pains. And that will give you the opportunity to get whisked away and call somebody like CCW Safe so that you don't say something that could be used against you. So,
Yeah. That's one of the biggest pieces of advice we give to our members is, you want to be helpful and you want to let them know, hey, look, I'm more than willing to cooperate, but right now I'm not at a time to give a statement. You can give basic, very basic info, but that's not the time to go into an interview. And if you immediately say, look, I would love to cooperate, but I don't feel like I'm in a good place right now too. I've just been involved in this incident and I would like to cooperate with my attorney. At that point on, there's really not much they can do at that point. And but they know you're not adversarial. They know that okay, this guy's going to cooperate. He's just shaken up right now. I know there are police departments in the past. I know NYPD, I think at one time had a policy where all their officers go to the hospital, and it's it's true. You don't know, uh, depending on your age, your shape, everything. There's a lot going on with your body and mind at that time. So
yeah, it's a horrible situation to be in, and you've been in it yourself. So you mentioned the critical response team that CCW Safe has. Kind of go through that if you don't mind, so that the audience
yeah.
has a better understanding.
So we have a critical response team that is a 24-hour. We have a 24-hour call center. Uh, those calls are immediately routed to we have attorneys on board. Don West is one of them. Jennifer Chance. They catch Don really catches all of them. It's been unless he's out of town. It doesn't matter if it's 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning. The call center we have a system and it goes to a series of calls. So it'll go to the first caller. If they don't answer, go to the second caller, don't go to the third caller. So our attorneys immediately pick up. They're the first contact. While that's going on, we have a text message that is sent out to the entire team. So we have team members who are working on the background of this guy. We have our investigators who are all retired homicide investigators with 20, 30 years of experience. They're immediately starting to pull up any information online, what if they can find anything online on this, and looking at flights. And then the attorneys determine, okay, is this something that we need to have boots on the ground now? Or if it's 4 o'clock in the morning, is this something that we need to get flights right now and have boots on the ground as early as we can get there? A lot of cases, if it's a brandishing case, or something like that, where there's not been shots fired, where there's no shooting, we'll be able to work without sending a team there. If there were shots fired shooting, we're most likely going to send a team out. So that team goes, and I can just kind of give you some of the past ones we've had. We send an attorney out, and we send Don West as our national trial counsel, and Jennifer Chance is our assistant national trial counsel. So one of them is going to go and start working for a member on finding the best attorney for that specific case in that specific area, jurisdiction, so forth. Then we also have investigator. An investigator is going to go out. He's going to start working with our member directly to get bond if he's in jail, to try to get bond, to work with his family, to start giving them the process of what's about to happen. And then if it's something that's a major shooting, or somebody's been shot or killed, and they're going to start looking at hiring a local investigator to get a local investigator on board, to start pulling video, and start building that whole case. Like I said, the first 48 hours, you know, that's the the most important time to lock all that down, to get all the information. And so that's why we want to be there as early as possible. We'll be
Yeah.
there that day or the next morning, depending on, the time of the call.
Yeah, I mean, some of your competitors' SOP is to say deploy an attorney,
Yeah.
but they don't have the whole comprehensive team working on your behalf. They're really just trying to get an attorney there to be your interface between you and the law. I,
Yeah.
I want to mention something I know you're aware of, but some of our audience may not be aware of this, is that if you decline to say anything to the police and, they pressure you in any way whatsoever, and if the thought crosses your mind that it could reflect poorly on you in court, it is against the law for the DA to introduce the fact that you took the fifth. Essentially, they're not allowed to mention that during that initial interview happening. So don't be afraid to follow Mike's instructions here. It cannot be used against you in court.
Yeah. And, one thing to think about, like if you're involved in a shooting, especially where there's been a discharge of a firearm, and especially if somebody's been hit or killed, you're probably going to be going to a police station minimum. You might be booked in jail, but and especially if you say no, I don't want to give an interview right now. I'll be happy to do it. I want my attorney present. They may likely stick you in a cell, and that's okay. It's just it's just going to be for a short time until you can get your attorneys on board and all that. So, you know, it's something that is, and not just immediately, but your life is going to be upended, and whatever plans you had for the next probably 2 to 3 weeks, they're gone.
Can you speak to the officer involved shooting you were involved in, or no? Because
Yeah.
you mentioned that was 2 years. If you're willing to share that, I'd love to hear it.
Yeah. It was in '96, so it's been a while. But yeah, I was on an entry team. I was on an undercover team, plainclothes team at the time, and we ran our own warrants. So it was kind of a self-sufficient team. We would go, either do interviews or go proactively, work in the street, get, a drug deal or something, get an unwitting CI, go get a warrant, and then we'd, run the warrants ourselves. And most of the warrants we run were high risk because a lot of them had guns involved that we knew that they would see when they would either go in to do a buy or uh, through the interviews. So, anyways, in 1996, we ran a warrant on a guy who had just got out of prison dealing dope, and so we had a CI run at him and came out, and, he was armed. He was bragging about, um, it was a white supremacist gang member, prison gang member that just got out. He was bragging to the CI about shooting. There were a couple black guys who tried to do a home invasion on him. He said he shot him, and we had a female CI, so we thought, well, it's probably, just trying to show off. We checked dispatch, we checked hospitals, we checked everything to try to verify that, and couldn't verify it. So we were kind of like, okay, well, he's probably just trying to, brag to this, show off to this female informant. But nevertheless, he had it in his mind, and if we kicked in his door, we thought that's probably what's going to happen. And anyways, we ended up running a warrant a few days later, and I knew as soon as we were in an unmarked van. As soon as we turned the corner, we slid the door open, and we were about to unass the van and hit the house. And we pulled the door next door in the front yard, and there was a kid playing, a little boy playing out in the front yard. The dad was on the porch, and he like ran out in the yard, grabbed the kid, ran him inside, and I knew at that point, I was like, okay, this is not going to be good. And so, we knew, had a good idea of what gun he had. He had 357. She said it looked like, it was a big revolver. And so as soon as we not announced, slam, entered, I was always number two man in the door. And as soon as we entered, he, you know, rolled up with it, and he was laying on a couch, rolled up with it. And so we engaged him. And then the father came out from the back room and attacked my partner, number one man. And of course, we were the only two that made it in the house when shots started firing. So everybody split on the front and grabbed him from behind. He turned, fired one shot, ended up killing both of the drug dealers. Got out of the house, reloaded, got everybody kind of locked down, and then we had to re-enter the house. And so that was the case of my case. And luckily, there's a lot of, and I don't know if this is a good time to get into it, but there's a lot of physiological effects that go on when you're involved in a critical stress incident. And I think one of the biggest things I learned from that is training, and how big an impact training has. If one of my favorite quotes is the one, we don't rise to the level of our expectations, we fall to the level of our training. If we don't have any training, what are you going to fall to? But tunnel vision, auditory exclusion, time slowing down. I remember my first round, I saw that gun raising to me and I saw a big muzzle flash. I thought it was bad guys. It was actually number one man. He got one round off as he was going in. And I remember, shooting, and I remember seeing the first round enter, like in slow motion, enter his hand, the back of his hand, and just using those entry wounds as a reference of, where my shot placement. And so I remember getting afterwards, I remember being home like 8 hours later. And at that time, the police department that I was on, they went ahead and did interviews of the officers immediately, but they let them come back a few days later and reread the report, make sure everything was okay. And that was, because a lot of times with memory distortion, you're not going to remember things. That's the biggest thing when you're being interviewed. You don't want to, people want to, it's human nature to want to justify your actions. And if you don't remember what happened, you're going to try to justify that by filling in the gaps. And when you fill in those gaps, and then a day or two later, remember, oh, okay, I remember this. I remember sitting on my couch, 8 hours later, thinking, what the hell just happened? Like what, trying to kind of piece things together. And I remember when they called that night, because homicide came, locked it down, they did an investigation, and then they did a search. So they didn't find later, but later they called and they're like, oh man, they got false truckload of cocaine and marijuana and all kinds of drugs, guns. They had all kinds of guns, money in the house. So that was a big relief, as I was sitting there, because a lot of times we'd hit houses and, you get crumbs because they're already sold out or whatever. But so that was, pretty much it. And it was immediately justified criminally. There were it went fairly quick that way. The DA's office, declined to file pretty much immediately. But 2 years later, the went right, it was like 2 weeks before the statute ran out, we were filed with a civil lawsuit.
Mm.
So that was, what happened on that. And then we went through that, and that was about a 1.5 to 2 year process. And when it got to summary judgment, it got kicked out. So we won that. But it was a huge learning experience. To that point, I think I'd been on about 6 years at that time. Probably at the height of my training, I was, we were running entry training all the time, shooting. I've done judo my whole life. We were on the mats a lot, and uh, just having that training, realizing what training does, and and then experiencing everything that you go through and seeing live time. I remember Alexis Artwell had a book called um, oh it was Deadly Encounters. And I remember reading that book not too soon before that. And after that, I got really interested in that because, I experienced tunnel vision, auditory exclusion. I heard one round shot, and it was just a pop. Had the tunnel vision, uh, had the memory distortion because, took me a couple days to of just, being at home to kind of remember everything. So,
So it's interesting. We've never discussed this between the two of us before. We routinely quote Sun Tzu
oh yeah,
with the adage that human beings never rise to the occasion; they fall to their level of training. Number
yeah,
one, and then the next thing that we harp on about is stress inoculation
yeah.
and how important it is that your average person goes to the range, they dump their EDC ammo, which in my book is a no-no because you got to practice the way you're going to play.
Mhm.
And your EDC ammo probably behaves completely different than ball ammo does. And you're standing there, you're not allowed to draw at most ranges unless it's an action bay.
Yeah.
And you put some shots down range. Good for familiarity with the controls, good to get the optic zeroed in if you have an optic. But beyond that, doesn't really do a whole lot. So we haven't spoke, but I started weight training in 1982 and
Mhm.
went on to set a bunch of world records in bench press, blah blah blah. And a couple of years ago, my schedule was so hectic that I just could not carve out enough time to get to the gym. But when you've trained for as long as I have, you have to do something. So
Mhm.
I decided to start using Mantis's products, the Blackbeard X and the X10, and do dry fire training with stress inoculation, right? So, volley of shots, do an exercise, sprint 20 yards, volley of shots, and do that for 45 minutes back to back, no break, like high intensity training. So, I say to people, if you think you can shoot with your heart rate being 140, 150 beats per minute and you've never done it before, there's a video that I like to send to people where there was a guy, his truck got jacked from him, and it was a 1-ton dually with the toolboxes on the side. And so there, a construction worker who was there saw this guy basically steal the guy's truck. He was 5 feet away and took 6 shots out of a revolver, and none of them hit the bad guy. The bad guy backed up, 50 feet or something like that, and matted it and drove over the guy who had, tried to shoot him,
Mhm.
killed him on the spot. And
Oh my gosh.
so I know Colonel Jeff Cooper,
Mhm.
didn't get all the way to condition black. I don't know who to give credit for the end, but a number you'll be interested in. I'm sure you're familiar with this, but 70% of Floridians who are killed by gunshot wound that did not commit suicide were killed with their own weapon.
Mhm.
So they pull their pistol, they freeze up, they go into condition black. The bad guy takes the gun away and shoots them, sort of thing. So now, fast forward to the current time. I put 1,000 rounds downrange every week in essentially with SBRs, suppressed SBRs. It could be live fire, could be dry fire, could be training guns like Unit Solutions have some really interesting training rifles. There's some sitting behind me. Uh, and I like the Mantis products, although you do kind of plateau after a little while. So it's nice to hear that audible ring of steel, but it's amazing where you start and where you end up when you use something that can measure it. Because
Mhm.
when I started, my heart rate was over 140 beats per minute. One of the simple things in Mantis, I was scoring like 68%. And I was like, God, that's awful. And then you get out when you start shooting in the 90s, like 92, 95. I feel like you kind of hit a plateau with the Mantis products. But when you're shooting ringing steel, obviously
Yeah.
it's different. And some of those training rifles actually have a Mantis X10 on a Unit Solutions training rifle that has realistic kickback, uh,
Uh-huh.
30 round magazines, 8mm projectile, blah, blah, blah. But It's funny you would bring that up because not too many people that we talk to discuss as human beings never rise to the occasion. They follow a level of training and then throws
Hmm.
the stress inoculation piece in on top of it. So, not that
Hmm.
I needed to be vindicated, but I appreciate your support because we're preaching from the same book.
Yeah.
So, I want to go back to the brief, and I put a couple things in that before I sent it to y'all
Okay.
as far as cases that have actually happened where there's been a different provider. And I wanted to get your thoughts on what the situation would have looked like if the person had been with CCW Safe versus some other carrier.
Hmm.
And again, we don't need to mention any of the other carriers. We
Right.
have a bunch of action items at the end of this video, and that we can give people criteria. Look into these things. If you have a
Yeah.
policy, look for these words. And if you don't have a
Yeah.
policy, look this up in other policies, companies, and make the decision for yourself. I mean, I would like to think that our audience trusts us, and for the most part, they probably do. But I would still encourage people to do their own research so that
Hmm.
you're not
For
simply
sure. Yeah.
relying on my word. So, the one that I wanted to cover initially, and let me see if I can find a screenshot here, a couple screenshots of this guy is Alan Colie,
Hmm.
and I'm guessing that as soon as I show the image, that people are going to recognize this. So the guy on the left side of the screen, not holding the phone, he's actually holding a gun at this point. But when the video, of course, was posted to YouTube and elsewhere, it was blurred out, taken out of the image, so that there were no terms of service
Hmm.
violated. You might recognize it from this side. So the tall guy holding the phone is a YouTube prankster, and the guy obviously holding the food is Alan Colie. He's the delivery driver, and you really need to be aware of the laws in your state, as you know, Mike. In
Hmm.
Florida, we were the first ones to get stand your ground. The law is 3 sentences long, and essentially, in a nutshell, if you feel that your life is in danger, you can use deadly force, even if it turns out that the guy wasn't reaching for a gun, or that he didn't
Hmm.
have a gun, or that he had an air rifle and not a gun. It doesn't matter in that type of scenario. Whereas other states, you're probably going to have a really rough time, whether
Hmm.
it was a justified shooting or not. So I don't know exactly what the laws were around Alan Colie. I know what he was charged with, and I know the high level overview of how it went down. So I'll just rhyme off these bullets. So he was harassed by this YouTube prankster who was much larger than him, and he was in fear. And there's more to it than what those screenshots show. He
Right.
was actually trying to walk away, and the guy continued to
Kept after
pursue
him. Yeah.
him.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what? Then he closed the gap. He turned around, closed the gap, and shot the YouTube guy, which he fortunately survived. I mean, it
Hmm.
wasn't fun, I'm sure, but he ended up getting charged with aggravated malicious wounding and unlawful discharge of a weapon in an occupied building. So there were a bunch of rumors at the time that his self-defense coverage provider dropped him. And then he ended up spending 8 months in jail, and he had a public defender. And there's I don't know if we'll ever know the whole story here as
Yeah.
to why he ended up going that route and whether or not it was even his choice, right? Because eventually the charges were dropped, except for the unlawful discharge of a weapon in an occupied building. And so he was released with time served, 8 months. But then he sent an email, a very strange email, to the president of his self defense provider, basically saying that he was very happy with them, but he chose to have his own attorney, this public
Hmm.
defender, and he signed the email, which strikes me as really odd.
Yeah.
Suffice it to say, uh, we'll probably, like I said, we'll probably never know what the fact of the matter is. But taking all of that into consideration, I know you've already described the critical response team, but
Hmm.
give me a hypothetical response on the part of CCW Safe to Alan Coley's, incident.
Yeah. Well, we have long, ever since the beginning, we always err on the side with our member. And if they are granted a, a hearing on self defense or standing, self defense standing, then we're going to provide services, period. We've had other, and you talked about the stand your ground, our, uh, in 2017, we were actually the first company in the industry to defend a murder one self-defense case, and it was in North Carolina, 2017. And in that case, our member did retreat twice in a stand your ground state and was still charged with murder one. So just because you have a stand your ground, if you're in a stand your ground state, doesn't mean that they are not going to charge you if you retreat once or twice. In that case, that was a 2-year trial.
Quick question.
And
was there a Soros DA involved by chance?
what's that?
Was there
I don't know.
Soros-backed
In that
DA?
case, I think that it was a small town.
Okay.
And I think that I don't know how many shootings they work. In that case, our member, like 99, probably 100% of people out there, if they're involved in something, he wanted to justify it. He felt like he was in the right. He tried to get away from this guy twice. So he had 3 separate fights. He was on the phone with 911 when the guy came up to him the last time. The guy was close to 100 pounds heavier than he was.
Wow.
Probably, I think it was 6, 7 inches, 8 inches taller than he was. So of course he thought, it took 4 people to pull the guy off of him, the first attack in this location. So he's like, oh, okay, yeah, I did everything. I called police even before he came, even after the shooting. He shot as the guy was coming to him with the last attack. And at this point, he was sweating so profusely, he thought he had been stabbed. He was checking his shirt, under his shirt, thinking, am I stabbed? Why am I, I'm losing fluid. And so he came, shot 2 shots. The guy was able to still take him down, get on top of him, shot 3 shots after that, and then ran to another phone to call 911 a second time. So, that case, it's like everything, what more could you do right in that case? But getting back to, we're going to err on the side of our member. We always have had that. And if they are granted standing for a self-defense trial, then we're in. No doubt about it. So, and we've even had cases where, like, say on a brandishing case, and the biggest thing with brandishing cases that we get are, you're in your car, somebody comes up and they're yelling at you, banging on your window, and you grab a firearm, they see it and they take off running, right? Well, our member doesn't call the police, but suspect's going to call the police. So they don't call the police. Police come out. Did you have a gun? Yes. And, you didn't point it at them, but even brandishing, a lot of those cases, we start out with those. We get them an attorney. Those cases are usually $5,000-$10,000 cases. We get them an attorney. And even if it's something outside of our terms of service, we're not going to, we don't say you got to pay that money back. We have gotten to a point where, for example, people, we find out that they lied. They gave us one story, then law enforcement another story. Like if they didn't tell us really what happened, or say they get attacked and they go home and get their gun and then go back, things like that are obviously outside of the case. We'll start the process. And, I don't think it hadn't happened much, but we have had a case or so where that has been the case. And we said, hey, this is outside of our terms. You don't have to pay us back. You got an attorney, but you take over from here. But even on those cases, they're wrapped up by that time. So we're always going to start services immediately. We're always going to get a retainer, get bond if we have to bond them out, whatever. And, even if it's a case where, they did something that was obviously outside the terms of service, like get attacked, go home, get a gun, and go back after the guy. We're not going to, if we were to say, okay, this falls outside our term of service, we're not going to have them pay that money back. But if they have a standing for self-defense in a court of law, then we're we're in it.
I don't think we completely closed the loop at the beginning
Yeah.
when we were discussing that it's illegal to pay insurance benefits when you've broken the law. And that's my fault, Mike. I apologize for that. But CCW Safe is not an insurance policy on the individual, correct? It's like member
Correct.
benefits.
So we're a legal membership. So our members have benefits from having that legal membership. Now we have a captive insurance in place that covers the risk of CCW Safe. So in the case of, if we have a case that goes to trial and we spend, in the North Carolina case over 2 years, we spent 350 to 400 in between there, $1,000. Then we can go back and we can get reimbursement from ourselves, from our captive insurance company to cover that. But that doesn't extend to our member.
Yeah.
But we pay everything up front for our members in that case. And we've had multiple cases now. John Wash is another case out in LA that we had recently. We had one on Thanksgiving Day, and that was actually an interesting case. That was in Las Vegas. We had a shooting on Thanksgiving Day. Actually, suspect was shot and killed. The next day, we had on Friday, day after Thanksgiving, we had boots on the ground. We got our guy out of jail, bonded him out, got him an attorney that we had previously worked with in that jurisdiction that was really good. She happened to know, all the detectives and knew the whole system, had been in court with all the judges, everything. So she was very well versed in that jurisdiction. And by Monday, we had no charges. We had a no charges filed.
Wow.
Now, what's interesting about that case was that member had 3 different coverages. He had us and 2 other coverages.
Wow.
And I won't talk about who they were, but he called. We were actually the second call. He called another one first and didn't get an answer and called us. We answered immediately. Like I said, next day we had out boots on the ground. The company that they called first called them back on Monday and told them, we'll hire an attorney, we'll cover the attorney. The
Wow.
other company didn't call them back, that they didn't called them either on Monday or Tuesday and told them to claim it on their home policy, their home insurance umbrella policy. And he was like, it didn't even happen at my house. So yeah, that was an interesting one because we don't have very many that have 3 different coverages. But that was the case in that one. And by the time the other ones even called back, we already had it taken care of and no charge.
That's amazing. Like I said, I just want to make sure that our audience is clear. When you join CCW Safe, you're not getting an insurance policy like some other providers. You're getting member benefits, and therefore the federal statute that disallows insurance benefits to be paid when you take a plea bargain, that is not applicable to CCW Safe. And to be honest with you, we're going to get into a whole bunch of criteria and reasons why we settled on CCW Safe ourselves. And we've got your top of the line package. I think it's $47 a month if memory serves me right. And we pay for that ourselves. We didn't get a freebie from CCW Safe. We didn't ask CCW Safe. That was our choice, my wife and I, because we've done our due diligence on this, to be quite frank. So let me just quickly show. I'm not going to go through the video of Alan Colie, just because we never know what's going to happen as far as potential strikes are concerned. But if you do a search, and I'm going to go past that, if you do a search on Alan Colie, you'll find all kinds of information, and you'll find the videos. This is actual video footage. And I've just got to err on the side of caution because we've had some unusual strikes against us for mentioning very innocuous things.
Yeah.
So I'm not even going to touch on them because it'll get us beat up again. So let's move on to the criteria since we brought that up. So let me bring up a chart of yours, Mike, and I'm going to show these to the audience, and let's hit on the main ones. I mean, if you want to hit on all of them, that's fine. If you want to hit on the main ones, that's fine as well. But this is the one that my wife and I have, the ultimate plan, and you've got a range that are much less. But speak to these criteria here, Mike. We'll start in the first column, and like I said, you can go through them all or what you feel the most important ones are.
So all of our memberships, we do have tiered system, but we don't want people to feel like, well, if I'm on the lower tier, I'm not going to get our basic service for everyone is we have non-reimbursed upfront coverage, and there's no limit, no cap on criminal. If you're criminally charged, so that means we're going to, if you're put in jail, we're going to get bail paid for. And now bail does have limits, but I think the basic limit is if it's on their 1.5 bond coverage. So that's, most of the time what we see, even in shooting cases, it's probably going to be $1 million bond, which is going to be $100,000 to get you out of jail. Some areas you might see 500,000, but I think if someone has been shot, especially if they're killed, it's probably going to be $1 million bond. So first off, if they're in jail, and we had a case recently where we sent two of our investigators out, and the attorney was already working on getting an attorney. Don West was working on getting an attorney there. We sent two investigators out. We didn't know what the bond was going to be because they hadn't set bond yet. So they set the bond, $1 million. We flew another employee out with a check to hand off to the investigators and then flew them right back. Wow. Once we heard what the bond was. So bond paid, get them out. Next is going to be attorneys. If it is a shooting, if there has been someone is deceased, it's most likely going to be $100,000 retainer fee, and that's going to be pre-trial. That's going to be from the time they're going to start bill against that from the time they're arrested to trial phase, and then if it goes to trial phase, then there's going to be another second retainer. So get the retainer on that. You're going to probably immediately get investigators. We've had cases, investigators, $45,000 over, weeks to work. If it goes on and looks like it's going to trial, then you have to get experts involved, whether they be, forensic pathology, whether they be firearms and tool marks examiners, whether they be, whatever experts you need. And in some cases, it may be more than one expert, which an expert could be $60,000 for trial. So those are the things that we cover up front for everybody.
Sorry, go ahead, Mike.
And then the differences in coverage come in things like you can get extended bond, you can get higher civil judgment coverage in case you're sued civilly. Most people, are judgment proof because most people don't have a few 3 or 4 or 5 million sitting around in a bank.
Right.
Some people do. So some people need that additional coverage. So those are the kind of the different things in the plan. As you can see there, some have more coverage for civil liability or more bond coverage. As you go up, I think I saw TSA, firearm replacement, some of the things that may be in a plan that aren't in the base plan. But the base plan is going to get everybody covered if they are if they're in a shooting and they're arrested.
So I actually had a question around the red flag law and firearm replacement. They're different, but could be related. So if there's a red flag law and they take somebody's gun away from them, they can go buy another gun, or you can replace a gun for them, or not. Like, how does that work?
I think that has to be. I think we can, but it has to go through court first.
Okay.
I'm not 100% sure on that. I'm not as familiar with the red flag laws as far as if they come out and take your firearms. Does it have to go through a court to, whether it's found valid or not before you can buy another firearm? I don't know on that one.
Well, let me give you an anecdotal firsthand experience. My ex-wife used my truck to go run some errands. This was 2014. And when she came back, she thought she had locked the door, but she didn't. And we jumped in another one of our vehicles and went to a concert. And when we came home from the concert, the sun had set, and I looked at my truck and I said, "Did you lock the door of my truck?" And she said, "Well, I think so." I said, "Well, it looks like the door is ajar." So sure enough, the door was ajar and there was a gun stolen out of my truck. So we called local PD right away, reported it. And they came back 6 months later and said, your gun was used in a murder. And you may have seen that we had a shootout with this guy on Seabreeze, which is where all the bars are in Daytona. It's south of where we live. And but it wasn't with your gun, but we were able to recover your gun from the suspect's home. My brother-in-law is the evidence manager for Volusia County. I never got my gun back.
Yeah, a lot of places you're not going to get it back.
Yeah.
Some places you might, but that's jurisdiction to jurisdiction. I know there's a lot of places that if a gun goes in, it's going to be destroyed, melted, whatever, and you're not getting it back. So if it meets the terms, if you're involved in a self-defense incident, they take your firearm, and that firearm is going to be in custody until it's decided, is there going to be a trial? If there's a trial, then it's going to be in custody for that entire time, and you may not ever get that gun back. So at some point, yeah, we have done that before. Now, we don't send a firearm to them. We pay the amount of the firearm, and because obviously they have to go buy the firearm. So
yeah, I don't want to quote my brother-in-law because I'm not an expert, but he did say something along the lines of what you just said. He said there are all these steps that you would have to go through in order to retrieve the weapon, and it doesn't happen. Just consider
a lot of places it's gone.
Yeah,
it's gone.
I mean, that's great that you have a replacement on that. One of the contingencies of your coverage, which I haven't seen anybody else cover, maybe they do, but I haven't caught it, is loss of income. So yeah, I had a situation where somebody drove through the front of my office years ago, and it was a major business disruption. And if I didn't have business disruption insurance at the time, I would have personally been in like dire straits. Yeah, and I was still able to make payroll and all that sort of stuff. Loss of income is a really big deal.
Oh yeah, in that case from North Carolina, our member was high-level medical device. He's a manager for a pharmaceutical company, medical devices. He was traveling all over the world when that happened, and they were going to fire him and give him 3 weeks pay. And so our critical response coordinator, who is a retired investigator, went out, met with his employer, and said, "Look, you can't do this. He has been charged with a crime here in America. You're innocent until proven guilty. And if he's just been charged at this point, there hadn't been anything." I mean, it was in the very initial part of it. So we ended up negotiating with his employer, got a year's severance package for him. They were going to give him 3 weeks. And so there's a lot of things, and that's one of the biggest things. I think you can look at our terms and see what we do and what we don't do. We just got back from this week. I was in Florida filming with Viewpoint with Dennis Quaid.
Nice.
And so they're doing, and we were talking about this, and Stephen, our member who was in that case, was talking about some of the things that are priceless, things like that, things like negotiating with your employer, things like keeping our one of our biggest obstacles is trying to keep our members positive. Somebody who's been charged with murder one and has an ankle bracelet and can only go to work and home and has lost their job. He couldn't. We were getting them diet plans. We were getting him workout plans. We were on the phone with him daily at first, then weekly. And he even said in this interview, he's like, this wasn't a 15-minute phone call. Some days it was 20 minutes. Some days it was 2 hours. He would call and trying to keep them positive. We had other members that have been arrested and put in jail in the middle of the night in their boxers and a t-shirt. And they can't go back home because there's a crime scene at their house and it hasn't been released. So our critical response team, our investigators, when they go out, what size do you wear? What size shirt and pants do you wear? They go buy them pants and shirts. They go buy them shoes if they needed. We put them up in a hotel because you can't go home.
Yeah.
A lot of that stuff that is not even anywhere in our terms. It's priceless. Working with your family. I mean, a lot of these people have never been involved in the criminal justice system, and they're about to be steamrolled. And just working with them on, okay, what's next, and counseling if they need counseling is another thing. If somebody's going to trial, trying to keep them positive because it's. Taking a life is so unnatural. And then on top of it, you're, like in that case, I remember one time he had a family member pass away. So we had to go to the judge and try to get to where he could go to the funeral. And we got permission that he could go to the funeral, but he had an ankle bracelet on. So he had like a 3-hour drive and back and to the funeral, and every 30 seconds that ankle bracelet was buzzing on his ankle. And it's like every 30 seconds it was a reminder that there's a chance I may be in prison, I may die in prison. So that type of mentally and emotionally what that does to you, there's a lot of stuff that people just don't think about. And I think that's another one of our critical response team. We have people, most of our investigators that we have either been involved in a shooting or they've worked officer involved shootings and they've seen it firsthand, what this does to you. So, and then, we talked about while we were out there on Viewpoint about, they were like, so you don't just cover firearms, but you cover other weapons of opportunity, or it's like, yeah, it doesn't matter if it's a concrete squirrel in the front yard or a tire tool, which that's another thing that a lot of other companies don't cover. And so yeah, and we can keep going through these terms if you want to, whatever. It's just we have our basic coverage is for everybody. And then we do have plans that, where you can add a spouse, and that's a deal. It's not, usually it's they join and then it's like, oh, okay, well, they get married, they add a spouse. And then maybe it's like, hey, we've accumulated a lot of wealth. So maybe we need to step up our civil liability coverage, so forth. So.
No, I think you did a great job providing a synopsis of
the key benefits. I just want to mention Gerald Phillips is on screen here, and the agency he was what destroyed any firearm used in a homicide. Gerald's one of my buddies from U.S. Arms Company.
Oh, yeah. Oh, nice.
He is an absolute master armor. So just give him a shout out for that. Gerald is
nice.
He's done some gun work for me and built me guns, and that's the best of the best.
Cool.
I also wanted to mention that you came all the way to Florida for Dennis Quaid, but you didn't let me know that you were in state. I mean, now I know where we stand.
Hey, if I would have known, I would have let you know.
Just kidding. So, and by the way, Chad told me the stories of buying people clothes, getting them a hotel room. And the first thing I think of when I hear that is like you described that gentleman over Thanksgiving that they called him back on Monday.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, that's an order of magnitude difference in quality of service. Then the next thing that I want to mention, well, I got a few things to mention. We've got a code down below in the description, SD15, for people to get 15% off the annual memberships that runs through till November 25th. So I just want to mention that for anybody who wants to sign up. And then here's something that I preached for years when I was a consultant, and that is purpose. Why? Like 2.5% of people and or businesses will tell you why they do what they do, and the rest tell you what they do. They might tell you how they do it, but they don't tell you what the purpose is of why they do what they do. So, not a big fan of Steve Jobs' politics. Definitely not a big fan of his widow's politics. She's a hardcore left-wing liberal, funds the Atlantic, all that kind of stuff. But when Steve Jobs came back to Apple, and I'm paraphrasing, he said, we think differently, and we want to make the world a better place, and we want to empower you with the tools to make the world a better place, because we know that you also want to make the world a better place. And we just so happen to make beautiful computers. Would you like to buy one? Versus, what you typically saw for ads back then is, this is the new HP Pavilion. It's got a 3 gigahertz CPU, 8 gigs RAM, a terabyte storage. You want to buy one? It's not very compelling. So I got to tell you, in my initial discussions, so I met Gary first from your office.
Oh yeah.
God bless him now that he's essentially retired.
Gary was the homicide detective who interviewed me on my shooting.
Wow.
Yeah.
I did not know that.
Yeah, his history is amazing. I mean, the things he did, even after that, working in Bosnia and then coming back, he was the chief investigator for the DA's office. That guy has got so much experience. He's on a whole different level. But yeah, he interviewed me in my shooting.
Yeah, that's amazing, because way back when we were being asked by a number of these different companies to sign on with them, and when I reached out to CCW Safe, somehow I got routed over to Gary and had a great exchange with him. But the next person was Chad, and almost instantly in the conversation, Chad said, "Member first. That's our policy. And everything else, becomes a byproduct or a result of that, but members first." And that really impressed me from like I said, the consulting side. People don't typically tell you why they do what they do. They tell you what they do. And I'm trying to think of how it was phrased, but it was something along the lines of how many people showed up. And I believe it was August 1963, in that 100-degree day of Washington, D.C., for the Million Man March, where Dr. Martin Luther King was presenting. And the answer that I was given to that when I heard somebody ask that is they said 0. Nobody went because of, any of those criteria. The reason they went was because Dr. Martin Luther King. And essentially when he said, I have a dream, and that was his purpose, and I want a more just world, that drew people to him. And here's what somebody said is Dr. Martin Luther King had have made the "I have a plan" speech instead of the "I have a dream" speech, none of us would have ever known who he was. So at the end of the day, there's a guy named Simon Sinek coined this as people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. Yeah. And you should always start with your purpose first, then how you do it. And at the end, oh, by the way, we make these beautiful computers. That's at the end. sort of thing. And
Yeah.
so I got to tell you, I've worked with thousands of businesses during my career, and very, very few people say this is why we do what we do. So kudos for that. I actually complimented Chad at the time just because
Thank you.
it's a rarity.
Yeah.
But it's a compass. It's a moral
Yep.
compass. It's a business compass. It's so important. And that's why, Steve Jobs took Apple from the brink of bankruptcy to Fortune 1 in a few very short years. And at the time, at 260 billion a year of revenue, he eclipsed everybody else, as far as Fortune 100 is concerned. So I want to pivot here a little bit. And so let me bring the screen up first. So this is the Cliff Notes version of Kayla Giles, and her coverage was dropped, and so she was doing a child custody transfer or whatever at Walmart with her husband that she was going through this really contentious divorce. He leaned into her car, supposedly. She pulled the gun and shot him because she was fearful for her life, and her coverage was pulled. And so she ended up basically with she didn't have decent representation is what it boiled down to. Now, she was convicted of I think she got a 30-year sentence, if memory serves me right. Hard to say though. 30 years, life plus 30 years. Hard to say what would have happened if she actually had proper representation, which she did not have proper representation. I have seen some clips of courtroom testimony, and it's not much to go off of, but when you get that gut feeling that like this person is truly guilty, I didn't get that. I didn't get that vibe at all when she spoke. And I mean, I know what the answer to the question is, but I'm going to ask it just for the benefit of our audience. What would CCW Safe would have done in that situation? Would you have represented her through to the end?
Well, yeah, I think, every case is so different, and every case has got to be investigated. And not, when I say investigated, not just by the police departments, because the police departments, like in the case of North Carolina, their investigation, so we got in and we already interviewed hundreds of people. They didn't even start their interviews until 2 weeks before the trial, a year and a half later, or more than a year and a half later.
How do you recall the specifics?
What's that?
How do you recall the specifics of your?
Yeah. Well, where are those people at? Are they even still around? So there's a lot of things that go into what we do. I can say, all I can say is we are going to err on the side of our member, and we're going to provide if they are given a if they have standing for a self-defense case in court, then yes, we're in it. We even talked about the one, attorneys pulling out during a trial. It's going to be cheaper just to finish the trial than to fund a whole nother malpractice lawsuit. So if they have standing for self-defense in court, then they're covered. And that's all I can say,
Yeah, good answer.
Yeah.
I want to throw a comment out there. And again, we're very strict in that we're not in the business of hurting other people's businesses.
Yeah.
There's another one of your competitors who's slightly different than the others that has a clause requiring you to pay for expert witnesses, subject matter experts, above and beyond the membership benefits.
Yeah.
And there have been cases where one of their members did not have $100,000, $200,000 to put a retainer on an expert witness, and therefore they got no legal representation because without the expert witnesses, this particular firm will not give you the legal representation. So,
yeah,
I mean, again, I just, it's a hard policy of ours. I'm not going to put the information out there. I will
Yeah.
try to do my best to guide people in the right direction.
For us, that's our case. Like if we're defending that case, that's our case. We're going to put whatever we need to. In that case that went to trial, the 2-week trial, we had um, two separate experts. Only one of them was even called to trial, but we paid for two. You know, we're going to pay for whatever, and the way we see it, and you know, luckily having Kyle Swede, general counsel, you know, the more we can put into the case, especially early on, it shows what we are
Agreed.
and how hard and how hard we're going to fight for this person. And it doesn't matter, you know, I don't recall the specifics, but I want to say one of those was around $60,000 just for one of them.
I believe it.
But it's not. I mean, that's our, you know, if we said, well, you got to pay your own expert witness, and you can't afford it. You know, we had a discussion, and we have a podcast. I don't know if it's out yet, but Chris Cunningham. We had a media day a few weeks ago. We brought some different companies in, and we're kind of telling them what we do and how we do it and why. And she made a comment, and she said she has been a homicide detective for over 20 years, in law enforcement for 30 years, and she was like, you know, if you want to talk about justice reform, CCW Safe is doing more justice reform than anybody else. And it kind of blew me away because I never thought about that. And I was like, wow. I was like, that's so I did a podcast with her last week, and I was like, you know, that really it affected me as a CEO and co-founder of this company. It kind of hit me like a wall. I was like, wow, that's like, why did you say that? And she said, you know, what she sees in justice reform that's being peddled is lower crime, or lower, you know, penalties are lower that don't affect, like, you know, larcenies are not 500 now, they're 1,000. So you know they adjust the statutes and the charges, and that's not justice reform. And she's like, you know, justice, when you can't afford an attorney, because all the thing that justice reform is doing now, all that is affecting the people who are just in and out of the system, who are committing crimes. It's
Yeah.
not affecting the people who are, you know, just in the wrong place at the wrong time,
Yep.
or maybe didn't get everything right, but they can't afford an attorney, and they don't, even if they did, they don't know who to get as an attorney. So, you know, if that's our case, I would, for us to say, well, you got to get your own, that's just shooting ourselves in the foot.
It's yeah, it's one of those fine print things that most people miss.
Yeah.
And I mean, again, I'd like to think that our audience, you know, trusts us, so that when we recommend something, there's that trust transfer, because we cross our T's and dot our I's. And that particular company, we met with them a number of times before we found that clause, and found out that it had actually been exercised as well. So that was the end of our conversation. And, you know, for something as important as self-defense coverage, we're going to be very pragmatic. So at the end of the day, you know, we came to a meeting of the minds last month or so, Chad and I, ever since then, we've been, you know, promoting CCW Safe simply because it is the best choice. End of story. And,
well, if you're in a trial, that whole trial may hinge on an expert's testimony.
So there were
and
three.
Yeah.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
If it does hinge on that, you better have the right expert in place.
So I'm trying.
And it's not going to be an expert where you're going to chintz on and say, well, this one's 60, but this one's 40, but the 60 is better, but let's save 20,000. No, we're going to go with the best one, because that whole case may hinge on that. In fact, in the case in North Carolina, we proved even before trial, the state, medical examiner had an entry wound as an exit wound.
Wow.
So that was the whole deal. It placed our member as standing over him. And because he was left-handed, they were thinking that he was right-handed, but he was left-handed. So, 2 weeks before the trial, our expert was like, "Hey, this is a wrong report." And they actually amended their report and admitted that they had that wrong, but it still went to trial. So that's what a good expert witness will bring.
Well, so there were 3 officers in Seattle that were charged in the death of Manny Ellis, and it happened a very short period of time before George Floyd. And there were no charges made against the officers until after Chauvin was charged and convicted. Then this Soros-backed DA in Seattle decided to charge them. I've got an article pulled up quickly that I won't go through, but it'll show their pictures. So these are the 3 officers, and I think they were potentially serving, they were potentially going to get sentenced for upwards of, I want to say it was 18 years for whatever the charges were. And I don't see it in here, and I'm not going to read through it, but it was a significant amount of time, put it that way.
Yeah.
So a good friend of mine, Dr. Jennifer Stankus, came in as the expert witness. So Jen is an anomaly. She's the same age as me, born in 1969, 55 years old. She's a veteran of 2 branches of the military, a licensed attorney, an MD in an emergency room, expert witness, on and on. She's unbelievable. She's a complete phenom. And so her and her husband, they're in Tacoma 2 weeks at a time. They're both ER doctors. They fly back home to Vegas. They work 1 week when they're home at a clinic, and then they take a week off. Very hectic lifestyle. Okay. So she had, I want to say at the time, she had like 80 cases on her docket to be a professional witness, an expert witness. And she put some of them that weren't as pressing as this case kind of on the back burner. She still did her due diligence, but she was concerned that these 3 cops were just going to get smoked after what happened to Derek Chauvin.
Yeah.
This is how smart Jen is. The week that she was testifying in that case, she went and rented a car because she was concerned that Antifa and these others who were demonstrating at the courthouse would try to come after her. And they did. And she was able to evade them with this rental car. So they never got a handle on what vehicle was hers because she didn't use it. And they didn't get a handle on where she lived because she's super smart, thinking way ahead, like absolutely amazing on her part. I can't remember if it was the day after or 2 days after she testified, the whole case was dropped. And
Oh, wow.
So when I spoke to her, she's on Survival Dispatch News occasionally. When I spoke to her, she said all the work she's done her entire life, which is very impressive. She was most proud of that she saved those 3 gentlemen from going to jail for a crime they did not commit. So, expert witness, you just said it.
That's impressive.
There's just an example though. Expert witness saved their life.
Yeah.
So absolutely critical. I want to bring up a couple things here quickly, and I won't dive too deep into it, but I love how that y'all have an archive of training videos and documents. And when you go to the resources page, you can select what you're looking at. So you can look at all these different categories that are available. I've gone through a bunch of it, and it's really high quality stuff. But what I really love and I'm really impressed with is your map.
Yeah.
So I got to show people how this works. So, for example, we were just talking Washington State. So if I click on Washington State, look at the information that comes up here. Can you open carry? What is your duty to notify law enforcement? So, for example, if you have concealed carry, can you go in state parks? A lot of states, you can't go in state or national parks with a gun. Restaurants serving alcohol, magazine capacity, 10 round, as we know. But the information here, I don't know how you could put a price on this. it's funny. We traveled to Washington to visit family a couple years back, and I mean, it was quite a adventure just to figure out what we could and could not take with us, and what would happen if we, there was a major SHTF event happen or whatever. So I mean, we had things like this, so fake Sharpies that are made out of G12 that are in, super sharp. You've got a great stabbing weapon. Same goes for like tactical flashlights. A lot of them you can change out the end, as to be a little bit more aggressive to use as a weapon. We had, I want to say, we had these not in our carry-ons, but we had a bunch of pepper sprays, and it was not very comfortable being there, to be honest with you, without a sidearm.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it's changed. I was there about a year ago, and downtown I was like, nope, we're out. Totally different from what it was, a few years back.
Yeah.
And that map is new on our site. That's a new thing that we added recently, which is really cool. And you brought up the resources too. Like we got going back, we've got 10 years of case studies done by Don West and Sean Vincent on, all these high profile cases, Ted Wafer case. There's tons of cases. I bring up Ted Wafer because we actually had a member after reading those articles and seeing a video on our website, had somebody come out to his house. It was way out in the country. Took officers like, I want to say like 40 minutes to get out there. But this guy was actively trying to get in his house, and he was looking at him through the window. And he was armed, and he wrote a letter to us and said, "Man, the only reason I was able to kind of keep my head was because of these articles." So, we tell even non-members, that's free for everyone.
Right.
Get on our website, look at these articles. We have tons of content, for the last 10 years on, how to de-escalate, how to avoid these situations in the first place, and, have a lot of the case studies that kind of give you a good basis of, different types of scenarios that can happen.
So just, you tweak me. This is a funny story. Don Man, Dr. Jen, my wife and I, we filmed Surviving Man together. Yeah, that's right. You met him. Yeah. So I want to say maybe 2 years ago or so, he was recalling how there's only 6 people live on his mountain in Virginia. It's a very rural location. And one of the homeowners is a single lady, a little bit older, and she wasn't, keen on the idea of getting a gun. So Don said, well, put some wasp spray by your doors. And, if somebody tries to break in, spray them in the eyes with the wasp spray. So then we had this period, I want to say better part of a year, where there would be one person after another popping up saying, you can't do that. There's a federal statute against using wasp spray, and clearly not understanding, the concept of imminent danger and your right to protect your life in many states. But here's what's interesting, Mike, is this really, really smart guy who works for the EPA in Colorado reached out to me, and we ended up having a very long conversation over Zoom. And he said, when you look at any of those products, there's a disclaimer on them that says something along the lines of not to be used for any purpose other than what's on the label, EPA regulation, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sort of thing. And it was interesting in that. So there wasn't a federal statute. There is this EPA regulation, but he said it's never been used. And the only reason that it was put there was that if somebody who was legitimately guilty skated on other charges, that the authorities would be able to step in and at least get them with something at the end. It was is a really interesting, dialogue. And like I say, it went on for a couple of years. So I want to mention a few miscellaneous things, and then I'll let you get back to your family. I really appreciate you doing this on a Friday night, Mike.
Yeah.
But if you all search online for NRA disinviting people in this space, there's an interesting story out there where One of the major providers that you people will recognize the name of quite quickly when they exercised the clawback clause, recoupment cost clause. The NRA cut ties with them.
Yeah.
Not the biggest fan of the NRA. I used to go as a VIP for years because of a relationship that I had with somebody who donated, but they did the right thing in that one. Let me just pull up this next part. So, Mike, I want to say maybe this was on your profile on the website, but correct me if I'm wrong. An important call out is that we are not an insurance company like some competitors. Legal self-defense membership. Important that we are able to cover things that typical insurance companies cannot. Members are not handed in insurance policies. CCW Safe is the policy holder and is insured by Captive Insurance, which is also owned by the founders of CCW Safe. No recoupment policy. And the only company to successfully cover a murder one charge in the industry. The on-site critical response unit, the goal, in addition to being member first, level the playing field when it comes to the justice system. I want to say maybe that was a quote made on your behalf, and I know we covered some of that stuff, but I think it was a good synopsis, to be honest with you.
Yeah, that's what Chris was talking about with the justice reform is that CCW Safe is able to give people who don't have the money for an attorney or everything that comes with it, or even know what to do, and we're able to level the playing field.
So I want to mention that there's lots of third-party reviews out there. So if you want to check up on all the stuff that we've discussed tonight, Gun University has an article on CCW Safe. There's another one over here. Everybody who's a gun person will recognize Pew Pew Tactical. They have a review on them as well. I would encourage you all out there in the audience to check those out. That's independent third-party opinions. That's not coming from us or from Mike. And so here's the final thing, Mike. When I started Survival Dispatch News a couple of years ago, I was adamant that when we get to the end of a video, that we provide homework or actionable items for our audience to do in light of whatever we were discussing. And that's based on the fact that almost every podcast out there takes something that's top of the news cycle. They report this thing that's top of the news cycle, or what I refer to as timeless topics, like, self-defense coverage, being gas station ready, those sort of things. And they editorialize it, but they rarely say, here are the things that you can do, because I saw a lot of comments from people on other podcasts that were good information. They just didn't close the loop. In that people say, well, it doesn't matter what I do. They're completely disenfranchised, right? And so that was what I kind of wanted to address with Survival Dispatch News in general. So I've got a few bullets that I'd like to share, and then I want to get your opinion on your suggestions, because I'm sure you'll pick something that I didn't think of, but it's highly likely that some sort of SHTF event's going to happen between now and January the 20th. The establishment is going to, make it very rough for Donald Trump to assume power, regardless of what, platitudes they're offering right now. So based on that, get self-defense coverage now. If you don't have it and you carry a pistol, you have a concealed weapons permit, get coverage so that you're not at risk. Again, we've got a coupon down below. It's good through 11/25 for 15% off all annual memberships of CCW Safe. The next part, and Mike, you hit on it, is get professional firearms training now. Get your skill set up there. Because these are perishable skills, practice on a regular basis. And, that could be live fire, dry fire, training rigs like the Unit Solutions rifles that I use, the U4 rifle, could be Manus X products, whatever the case may be. So those are my top three from my perspective. But what do you recommend to our audience for things people should do in light of our conversation?
Number one, get coverage, and I don't care if it's with us or somebody else. Like I said, everybody in this industry, I believe, is going to do what they say they're going to do. I know we're the best because of the way we do it. We do things differently. So get coverage. Number two, get training, but also remember, you have to constantly think, because you can be, you can say, okay, I've been told not to say this or say this if something happens. It's the smartest thing Mike Tyson ever said. Everybody's got a plan until you get hit in the face,
Yeah,
which that's going to go off here in about 30 minutes. I'm
I
anxious
know.
to see that. But
I can't
so
wait.
you have to plan. And I think, we tell people when you're at a range and you're on a target, whether it be outdoor, indoor, whatever, as you're shooting and as you're doing drills, whatever, all, have a plan for the aftermath. Have a plan of, okay, just think about putting yourself in a situation where you had to draw your weapon, fire your weapon. There's chaos going all over. You're not going to remember things, and everybody says, "Well, I'll do this," but then when the time comes, all that goes out the window, and you're wanting to justify yourself. So have a plan. Okay, this is what if all this has happened and this is going on, I need to be able to recite. I am happy to help. I'll be happy to give a full statement, but this is not the time to do it. I'm shaken up. I don't feel good. I don't remember, this is not the time to do that. So I think having, implementing that into your training, the more you go over that and the more you kind of visualize what might be happening at that time. If you ever been involved in a heavy car accident or something like that, you're like, what just happened? That's going to be what is going to happen out there. Everything is going to go to hell in a handbasket. So have that mental preparation along with and mental training along with your physical training. If you do get into a situation, have a plan of what to do for the aftermath.
Yeah, that's great advice. I can tell you, as an athlete competing at a world-class level, that visualization is really powerful.
Yeah.
And so in a 12-week prep, say for a large competition or like a world championship, and you've set this goal to bench press whatever, that video that at the beginning of the video tonight was 638 pounds, and I was competing in the 198-pound class.
Wow.
I was 46 years old and that was a world record. And I was competing against
That's
Russians
awesome.
and Germans that were half my age.
Yeah.
So it was my Rocky IV moment that particular year.
Yeah, I competed in judo for years, and I competed against a lot of Russia and Kazakhstan. And, it's just like same thing. You get on the mat, your coach is yelling at you over there, or I'm yelling at my players to do this, and they never hear it. Because it's that critical stress starts going in, you're fighting, you're gripping, doing everything, and it's just all out the window. So visualization, is key.
Huge. Absolutely huge. I grew up in the construction industry, and I can't tell you how many times somebody was scared that they were going to fall off the wall, and they did. And so it's kind of like, if you think you're going to fail, you're going to fail.
Yeah.
If you visualize yourself succeeding, it's powerful when used in the right context. So, Mike, I've got a bunch of boilerplate stuff to go through with our audience. So I'll let you get back to your family. And I really appreciate your time. For all y'all in the audience, hang out for another few minutes. I've got all the stuff like the conflicted question, whatnot to cover. But sorry to interrupt there, Mike. Really appreciate your time. Really appreciate the information. Really appreciate the services that you offer, because I personally, I have full confidence in my wife and I having coverage to you guys, not so much with the competitors anymore. But,
well, thank you. That means a lot, because it's important to us too, for ourselves and for everybody else. We take it seriously.
I'll add that everybody that I've worked with at CCW Safe has just been right on the money. So
nice.
Good. Like, congratulations on that side as a founder. I know how hard it is to build a business, and people are your greatest asset, and it's really hard to build a team. You know? So
it is. Got the right people on the bus. I feel like we got the right people on the bus. So
I would agree. So
all right, Mike, appreciate it.
Likewise. Enjoy your evening.
You too.
Can't wait to see Trump kick Jake's ass, by the way.
Yeah. I'm ready for it.
Perfect. Thanks again.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye.
All right. So for the rest of you still hanging out with me here, I just want to briefly mention a couple things. Number one, the branch chain amino acid drinks from Native Path. I'm not sure that I actually completed my thought on this for everybody last night, so I'm going to do it tonight just so that there's no question as to what I was getting at. So human growth hormone is comprised of 191 amino acids. This is not human growth hormone, by the way, but there are bits and pieces of those amino acids that are extracted for different purposes. So one of the things that RFK is going to do is he's going to open up the market for what are called peptides. Peptides are combinations of amino acids that are derived from human growth hormone. So for example, there's one product called Frag 176 191. It includes from number 176 to 191, those amino acids are included in that product, and it's meant to accelerate weight loss. Human growth hormone does all sorts of things. It can make you leaner, it can reduce your recovery time. Your jaw's not going to grow all funky and stuff like that. Once the plates are formed on your bones, that stuff doesn't happen. But where I'm going with that is that there is a combination of amino acids in these drinks, branch chain amino acids. I've been drinking these types of products now for upwards of 30 years. And I'm coming into week number 7 with Nature Path. And the fact of the matter is it's the best BCAAs that I've taken. I will not put anything on our channel that I can't stand behind. And here's the deal. My energy level is way better. The combination of amino acids in this have done wonderful things and do wonderful things for your bladder health. I was getting up 4 times a night, 5 times a night. I'm 55 years old. Give me a break. Once a night or maybe no times a night since I started drinking this, which I would have never believed it until I actually tried it. Like if I had read that, I would have thought, yeah, sure. And I have to try things to make sure that it actually does what it says it's going to do. These guys are an awesome company as well. So I would highly encourage you to take advantage of the link below. You can get up to 44% off. Tastes amazing. Instead of drinking that sugar water, Cokes and sodas, you'll notice a big difference when you take this, when you use this product. I hate to sound like a broken record on Sawyer, but it's really important to mention this. And you're probably going to get sick and tired of me saying this, but this industry is full of a whole bunch of people selling snake oil. And there's a really popular one that Mike and I alluded to last night that's blue. Now, they're blue Sawyers as well. And anything with Sawyer's name on it is a high quality product. And we'll explain why in just a minute. I've cut a bunch of the competitor products open, and the differences in, say, their QA, QC, quality assurance and quality control is visible to the naked eye. Sawyer doesn't have that problem. This is an American-made product in Tampa, Florida, American-owned. These guys are awesome. They do all kinds of altruistic things around the world, helping people in third world countries, you name it. Every single Spec Ops soldier that I know has across the board endorsed Sawyer's products. And I'm going to tell you what, Survival Dispatch is behind these guys 100% as well. Check this out. I think Mike mentioned this last night. I don't remember if I showed it, but this is the Sawyer cleaning plunger. So the filter in this is rated for 100,000 gallons out of this little tiny guy. After you've put some, let's say less than clean water through it, you can flush it with this syringe. But check this out. On this end, as you can see, it's threaded. So you can take an empty water bottle, put it in some really crappy water, turbid water, screw this on the top, squeeze the bottle, you get purified water comes out the other end. They also make little pouches, little bags that you can fill up with water, screw it into this, and then utilize it. I'll tell you what, I said to my wife, I said, finally, it's like a burden's been, a weight's been lifted off my shoulders. We were sent a ton of water treatment products a few years ago, and I spent a significant amount of time testing them, only to turn around and say, holy crap, this stuff's like snake oil. We had one of the countertop units that was like $1,000 unit sent to us, and we sent the water away to a third-party lab for testing, and a $30 Brita outperformed the $1,000 stainless steel unit on our counter. So Sawyer Products, you can buy their products at their website at Sawyer Products. You can buy them on Amazon. Can't say enough good things with regards to those. Obviously, CCW Safe, we've discussed at length tonight. Advantage Gold. So I'm doing a webinar next Thursday with Jeremy Blossom from Advantage Gold, and we're going to be covering the top 5 preps that all y'all should be doing before January 20th, because it's highly likely that things are not going to go entirely smooth between now and then with the transition of power to Trump, regardless of what platitudes they lay on us. I will not be sharing that content anywhere else. It doesn't cost anything for you to attend. It's the very first link in the description down below. If you sign up, whether you attend or not, we hope you attend, but even if you don't attend, Survival Dispatch gets a small stipend. And those small stipends are what keeps the engine going for Survival Dispatch. It's how we're able to, like, the amount of work that goes into an episode as far as research, producing the briefs, condensing it down to something that we can cover in an hour and a half, 2.5 hours. It's very labor intensive. We do this 7 days a week. If you look at my calendar, it's 80 to 100 hours a week. I'm not asking you to be, show sympathy for me or anything, because I love what I do. And our mission, as we've said many, many times, is dispatch information so our fellow Americans and friends of America can survive in these very uncertain times. As long as we do that, everything else is just good stuff. So if you could sign up for that webinar, would greatly appreciate the assistance. Doesn't cost you anything out of pocket. And if you do attend, you'll get a ton of great information. Patreon.com, Survival Dispatch. There's a link down below. Patreon.com/Survival Dispatch. And if you go there, the free accounts, you get 50% of the content, which includes all of the briefs for our episodes. There's a lot of extended information in there that the panelists and myself use during the broadcast. You can use it to follow along now, or you can use it to do your own investigation afterwards, which we always encourage. The paid member is only $9.99 a month, and it does make a difference, the number of people who sign up for that, because, again, it allows us to spend more time on Survival Dispatch than other activities that we have to do to make an income to pay our bills. Biggest thing with, you want to talk unintended consequences? We came up with this idea several weeks back, maybe a month back now, that we were going to offer paying insiders access to a encrypted chat on Signal. Signal is an app that you install on your phone. It's open source software. There's no backdoors. All the intel agencies use it. There's no vulnerabilities in it because it's open source. You have developers laying their eyes on it all the time. The couple security issues that have been found over the years have been what are called man-in-the-middle attacks. They were quickly patched, same-day patch. So my original intention was, we'll start up this Signal chat. And if comms go down in some capacity, but the data network stays up, this will be a good spot for us to get important information out to y'all. What I didn't anticipate was that, SDN regulars like S2, Jeff MD, Mike Sterling, and more, the interactions with our followers and the intel that's being shared, the conversations, it's crazy. Y'all probably heard me say it this week. I'll look at it. I'm going to bed and there'll be like 125, 150 unread messages. I know I'm not going to get caught up. I mark them as read. I go to bed. I get up in the morning. There's another 125, 150. Do my best to try and keep up. But that has turned out to be a great aspect of the Survival Dispatch Insider community. So would encourage you to head over to patreon.com/Survival Dispatch. If you don't want to pay the $9.99, that's fine. You can still get a free membership. All right. If you're still hanging with me here and you haven't hit the like button, please mash the like button. It makes a big difference in that all of the platforms out there that we broadcast to, so both YouTube channels, Rumble, X, Facebook, LinkedIn, they all want you to stay on their platform. So the longer you watch our videos, the more likely they are to recommend us to other people. And the same goes for liking, commenting, and sharing. The more activity that they see, the more likely they are to recommend it to other people. It's the only way that we're going to be able to work our way out from under the suppression that we're under at YouTube in particular. And we didn't really focus on Rumble until several months ago. We just crossed 7,000 subs today, fraction of the 400,000 that we've earned over the years on YouTube. But would greatly appreciate that. Upcoming episodes. I recorded an episode today with JJ Carroll. I know y'all love JJ. I love JJ. The guy is just a true hardcore American. We had a brief prepared and we got way off in the weeds, and it turned out to be an absolutely fantastic conversation. That'll air at the usual time, 7 p.m. Eastern tomorrow night. Sunday, we got Brad Wozni coming back. He's one of General Valley's lieutenants. Awesome guy. Here's my guy here, my 1,000-yard expert, Velcro, 1167. Appreciate the support very, very much. Thank you, brother. So Sunday evening, Brad Wozni. Monday evening, probably Mike Glover, but it might be another day later in the week. Mike's a friend of mine. We've filmed TV shows together. Y'all know who he is. He's a legend in the survival industry, just an amazing guy. Tuesday night, really excited. We have got Artur Pavlovsky coming on. He is the pastor who left communism in Eastern Europe many years ago, ended up in Canada. And when they started doing their COVID lockdowns, he kept preaching to his flock. They threw him in jail for 55 days. I done all sorts of untold nasty things towards him. And he is still standing steadfast. And he is a true hero and an amazing man. And I love it when people's convictions are so strong that there's nothing that the bad guys can do to knock him off course. It's going to be a phenomenal conversation on Tuesday night. All of our guests, as y'all know, are really top shelf people, and incredibly blessed to have them. With that being said, we're trying to get each episode off the ground a little bit faster. So that's why we moved the conflict of question in the end, the endorsements, all that sort of stuff. So here's the conflict of question tonight. Gordon had the opportunity to flee the compound where he and his son were kept prisoners. To get it done safely, he would have to free himself and his son only. This meant leaving behind several people who were victims just like he was. Were he to bring down the compound somehow and then leave, he would place his life and that of his son at considerable risk. If you were in Gordon's place, would you slip away unnoticed to keep you and your son safe, or would you risk both of your lives for strangers? So the way this is going down, if it's myself and my son, we are going to escape. There's an old adage that you can't look after anybody else till you look after yourself, pardon me. So my son and I, we're going to get out of there, and we're going to get to safety, and we're going to get back to the rest of our people. And then we're going to go rescue our people from, this detention center, whatever you want to call it, because I've got firsthand knowledge now of this place. I've got firsthand knowledge of the people, of their processes, meaning the bad guys. And are we going to go back and get our people? Absolutely. But it doesn't do us any good to get killed in the process of trying to escape. So we're going to escape. We're going to regroup. We're going to come back, and we're going to kick ass on that. And I don't know if the Mike Tyson, Jake Lang. Is it Jake Lang? I'm having one of those moments. Maybe I got the name wrong. I don't know if the fight has started yet, but dying to see what comes out of that. And that's it for content tonight. Please like, share, comment, subscribe. And God bless America.
If you carry a firearm and discharge your weapon in self-defense, you could face hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal fees and expenses. So carry the protection of CCW Safe, Self-Defense Legal Services membership. Upfront payment of all criminal and civil defense costs with no out-of-pocket for members. Unlimited defense budgets, unmatched legal expertise. Carry the same level of support police officers have. Carry CCW Safe, the highest caliber.